You feel it, don't you? The room gets quieter when you walk in. Smiles get tighter. Jokes stop mid-sentence. Because something changed. You didn't get louder. You got undeniable. They don't hate you for what you said. They don't fear you for what you did. They're triggered because you stopped asking for permission. Once you see how the game really works, once you stand tall without explaining yourself, once your presence alone shifts the balance they know, you're not trying to dominate. You just exist at a level they can't control anymore. And that realization, that's what makes them nervous. You didn't announce your arrival. You didn't clear your throat or raise your hand or ask for attention. You just walked in, and the air shifted. Conversations didn't stop because you demanded silence. They stopped because something about you rewired the room. People looked up without realizing why. Some leaned back. Some leaned in. Some suddenly remembered they had somewhere else to be. That's when you knew, not because anyone said it out loud, but because the energy betrayed them. See, power doesn't need noise. Power doesn't rehearse speeches in front of mirrors. Power walks in like it already owns the place, not arrogantly, not desperately, just comfortably. Like it's been there before, like it knows where the exits are. And that comfort, it terrifies people who built their identity on being the loudest voice around, before they spoke over you. Before they tested you with jokes, with side comments, with little pushes meant to see if you'd flinch. Before you were something they could predict. Predictable people are safe. Predictable people are easy. But now they hesitate. Now they measure their words. Now they watch your face instead of ignoring it. Because unpredictability wrapped in calm confidence feels dangerous. You didn't change your clothes to impress them. You didn't change your tone to intimidate them. You changed internally. You stopped shrinking. You stopped over-explaining. You stopped filling silence with nervous words. And silence, real silence, makes people uncomfortable. Silence forces them to project their fears onto you. They start imagining motives you never stated, intentions you never claimed. That's the funny part. You didn't do anything dramatic. They wrote the drama themselves. When you enter a room and people suddenly straighten their posture, that's not coincidence. When jokes get softer, when sarcasm gets careful, when eyes dart to see how you'll react, that's not respect earned through force. That's recognition. Recognition that you're no longer operating on their level. Recognition that you see the game, and worse, that you're no longer playing it for approval. Some will smile wider than necessary. Some will laugh too hard at things that aren't funny. Some will try to pull you into conversations just to feel your temperature, just to make sure you're still controllable. Others will avoid you entirely, because avoidance feels safer than confrontation. They all respond differently, but the cause is the same. Your presence now carries weight, and weight bends the space around it. You didn't steal anyone's crown. You didn't push anyone off a throne. You simply stood up straight long enough for them to realize the throne was imaginary, and people who built their authority on illusions hate mirrors. They hate anyone who accidentally exposes how fragile their position really is. What changed the room wasn't aggression. It was certainty. Certainty doesn't rush. Certainty doesn't prove. Certainty observes. And when you observe instead of react, people start revealing themselves. They talk more. They overcompensate. They slip. They show insecurity through arrogance and fear through fake confidence. You become the quiet reference point, the one they calibrate themselves against without admitting it. That's why the room feels different now. Not because you demanded dominance, but because dominance recognized you. Because when you stopped needing validation, you became the standard, and standards don't argue. They just exist, steady, unmoved, letting everyone else decide how to deal with the discomfort of being measured against something they didn't see coming. At some point, you stopped asking. Not out loud, not dramatically, just quietly in your own head. You stopped seeking approval wrapped in polite smiles. You stopped waiting for nods before moving forward. And the moment you did that, something twisted in the way people treated you. Because permission is comfortable for them. Permission keeps the hierarchy intact. Permission reassures them that you know your place. Respect, on the other hand, doesn't ask where it's allowed to stand. Before, you'd explain yourself. You'd justify decisions. You'd soften your words so no one felt threatened. You'd package your confidence in humor, in humility, in disclaimers. All of that was permission seeking disguised as politeness. They loved that version of you. That version was safe. That version waited to be chosen. But respect doesn't come from being chosen. Respect shows up when you choose yourself and don't apologize for it. When you stopped asking, they noticed. Not because you announced it, but because the dynamic broke. You spoke when you needed to. You stayed silent when you wanted to. You didn't rush to fill gaps or fix awkwardness. You didn't chase reactions. And suddenly, people leaned in instead of talking over you. They waited. They adjusted. They reacted instead of directing. That's the shift. That's when permission quietly left the room and respect took its seat. Respect isn't warm. It's not friendly. It's sharp around the edges. It makes people careful. They start choosing words instead of throwing them. They stop testing limits because limits are now implied. That's why some people mistake respect for fear. It's not fear of you. It's fear of losing control over you. They can't steer you with approval anymore, and that makes them uneasy. The funny thing is, you didn't demand respect either. Demanding respect smells like desperation. It reeks of insecurity. You simply stopped negotiating your worth. You stopped explaining why you deserved space, time, attention, authority. You acted as if those things were already yours. And humans are strange like that. They argue with requests, but they adapt to assumptions. Some people will try to pull you back into the old rhythm. They'll say you've changed, and they won't mean it as a compliment. They'll joke about how serious you've become, how quiet, how different. What they're really saying is you're no longer easy to manage. You're no longer performing the role they were comfortable with. And when roles break, respect fills the vacuum or resentment does. You don't get to choose which one they feel. You only choose how you stand. Respect makes people reveal their priorities. Those who valued you will rise to meet you. Those who benefited from your permission will resist. They'll challenge you subtly. Passive remarks, questioning tones, little power plays meant to see if you'll fold. And when you don't, when you stay calm, when you don't bite, something clicks in their mind. This version of you isn't negotiable. That's when you see it clearly. Permission was a leash. Respect is distance. Distance that forces people to approach you carefully or not at all. And once that distance exists, you don't need to explain yourself anymore. Your actions speak in a language that doesn't need translation. People either understand it or expose themselves trying to ignore it. You didn't become colder. You became clearer. You didn't lose empathy. You lost tolerance for being underestimated. And in that clarity, respect didn't ask for entry. It replaced permission the moment you decided you were done waiting for the door to open. Silence used to scare you. The gaps between words felt like traps, like moments where you had to perform, explain, defend. you used to rush into them, patch them up with laughter, with extra details, with reassurance meant to keep everyone comfortable. But then something flipped. You realized silence wasn't empty. It was loaded. And once you stopped fearing it, it stopped being awkward and started being dangerous. When you don't speak right away, people start talking for you in their heads. They project, they assume, they reveal. Silence becomes a mirror, and most people hate what they see when they're left alone with their thoughts. They start wondering if they said too much, if they said too little, if they offended you, if you're judging them. All that noise happens without you saying a single word. You noticed how quickly power shifted when you paused instead of reacting. When someone tried to provoke you and you didn't bite, when they expected defense and got nothing, when they threw sarcasm your way and it landed on the floor untouched. Silence denied them feedback, and without feedback, their confidence collapsed. People need reactions the way performers need applause. Take it away, and they start unraveling. You didn't go quiet to be mysterious. You went quiet because you no longer needed to be understood by everyone in the room. Understanding is overrated. Control is cleaner. Silence gives you control over timing, over direction, over momentum. Words rush things. Silence slows them down. And when things slow down, you get to watch who panics. There's a particular discomfort that shows up when silence stretches just a little too long. People shift in their seats. They clear their throats. They laugh at nothing. They start explaining things you never question. That's the moment you realize how much power you're holding. You didn't threaten them. You didn't confront them. You simply refused to participate in the noise they were used to hiding behind. Before, your words were accessible. People could interrupt them, twist them, talk over them. Silence can't be interrupted. Silence can't be misquoted. Silence forces others to carry the weight of the interaction. They either rise to it or crumble under it. And most crumble because they've never learned how to sit with themselves without distraction. You began to see patterns. The loud ones grow louder when silence enters. The insecure ones rush to fill it. The manipulators test it, poking and prodding to see if they can pull a reaction out of you. And when none comes, they expose themselves. Silence turns masks transparent. People show their intentions not through what they say, but through how desperately they try to make you speak. Your silence wasn't passive. It was deliberate. It was observant. It was patient. While others wasted energy trying to control the room, you controlled yourself. And self-control unsettles people more than aggression ever could. Aggression is predictable. Silence isn't. Silence keeps them guessing, recalculating, second-guessing every move they make around you. You noticed how authority crept in without introduction. People waited for you to speak. They checked your expression before committing to opinions. They adjusted their tone mid-sentence when they realized you were listening without reacting. Silence turned you into a reference point, not because you demanded attention, but because attention drifted toward you whether you wanted it or not. There's a cruelty to silence that words can't replicate. Words can be argued with. Silence just sits there unmoved, daring people to confront their own discomfort. And once you master that, once you stop leaking emotion through unnecessary explanations, your presence alone starts doing the talking for you. The room doesn't need your voice to know where the balance has shifted. You didn't need a scoreboard to know you were winning. You watched faces instead, tight smiles, forced laughs, sudden seriousness when you spoke. The shift didn't come from applause or praise. It came from reactions that didn't match the situation. People don't react strongly to things that don't threaten them. They react when something pokes at their position, their comfort, their illusion of control. When you were smaller in their eyes, reactions were casual, dismissive, playful. They joked freely. They spoke without checking themselves. They interrupted you without a second thought. That was comfort. That was familiarity. And familiarity is only extended to those who aren't perceived as a risk. The moment your growth became undeniable, the reactions changed tone. Not louder, sharper. You noticed how some people suddenly became critics. Every move you made needed commentary. Every decision invited unsolicited advice. That wasn't concern. That was insecurity dressed up as wisdom. People only start micromanaging when they feel replaced. Only start correcting when they feel compared. Your rise forced them into a mirror they didn't ask for. Others went the opposite direction. They became overly agreeable, too supportive, too eager. Compliments stacked awkwardly on top of each other. Praise that felt more like insurance than admiration. They weren't celebrating you. They were trying to stay close to power before it moved too far away. Reactions like that don't come from respect alone. They come from calculation. Then there were the subtle ones. The pauses before responding to you. The way conversations shifted when you entered. Topics changed. Voices lowered. Jokes softened. People started checking your face mid-sentence, adjusting their delivery in real time. That kind of behavior isn't conscious. It's instinct. Animals sense hierarchy faster than logic ever could. You didn't have to announce success. Their discomfort did it for you. You didn't have to defend your growth. Their defensiveness confirmed it. Every eye roll, every passive remark, every sudden boundary they tried to draw told the same story. You had crossed an invisible line, and they felt it before they could explain it. Some reacted with distance. Calls slowed down. Invitations stopped. Energy faded. Not because you did anything wrong, but because proximity to you now reminded them of their own stagnation. It's easier to avoid the measuring stick than to grow taller. Avoidance is a reaction too. A loud one, even when it's quiet. The most revealing reactions came when you did nothing at all. When you stayed calm. When you didn't engage. When you didn't explain. People filled the gap with assumptions. They accused you of arrogance, of coldness, of changing. Those labels weren't about you. They were about their loss of influence. When people can no longer read you, they invent stories to regain a sense of control. You realized something important watching all this unfold. Growth doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It announces itself through resistance, through friction, through people behaving out of character around you. If your rise had been imaginary, it would have been ignored. If it had been harmless, it would have been celebrated. The tension meant it was real. Reactions don't lie the way words do. Words can be rehearsed. Reactions are reflexes, and their reflexes told you everything you needed to know. Who felt threatened? Who felt inspired? Who felt exposed? Who felt irrelevant? You didn't need validation. You had evidence scattered across their expressions, their tone, their sudden change in behavior. That's when you stopped trying to interpret what people said about you and started watching how they moved around you, how they adjusted, how they overcorrected, how they stumbled. Your rise wrote itself into their nervous system, and no amount of pretending could erase that imprint. You didn't climb loudly. You rose just enough for their reactions to betray the truth. Confidence didn't show up like a costume you put on one morning. It crept in quietly, piece by piece, the moment you stopped doubting every step you took. At first, it was subtle. You held eye contact a second longer. You spoke without rushing. You didn't rush to agree just to keep things smooth. and people barely noticed. Not because it wasn't there, but because confidence on its own doesn't scare anyone. But confidence has a habit. If you don't sabotage it, if you don't dilute it with apologies and explanations, it hardens. It gains weight. It turns into something sharper, something less flexible, something that doesn't bend to moods in the room. That's when it stops being just confidence and starts becoming dominance. Dominance isn't loud. It doesn't puff its chest. It doesn't need to announce itself. It's the calm certainty that you're not here to be evaluated. You're here to operate. And when people sense that shift, they feel it in their bodies before they understand it in their heads. They start reacting differently because dominance changes the rules without asking permission. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't interrupt more. You didn't push people around. You just stopped yielding automatically. You stopped stepping back to make others comfortable. You stopped adjusting yourself to fit the room. And suddenly, the room started adjusting to you. Chairs turned. Attention leaned your way. Conversations slowed down when you spoke. That's not charisma. That's dominance settling in. At first, some people tried to test it. Little challenges. Slight disrespect disguised as humor. Casual attempts to pull you back into old patterns. They expected you to flinch, to laugh it off, to re-earn your place. But confidence that has matured doesn't react emotionally. It observes. It waits. It lets the other person expose how desperate they are to regain control. When you didn't react the way they expected, something snapped. Their tone changed. Their energy shifted. The playful tests stopped being playful. Because dominance isn't about winning arguments. It's about making arguments unnecessary. The moment people realize they can't move you emotionally, they understand you're operating from a higher ground. You noticed how your decisions started landing heavier, even simple ones, even casual choices. People followed without asking too many questions. Not because you demanded it, but because certainty is contagious. Humans gravitate toward whoever seems most sure of where they're going. And you were no longer broadcasting doubt. Dominance made you comfortable with being misunderstood. That's a big one. Confidence wants to be liked. Dominance doesn't care. Dominance knows that clarity is more important than approval. You didn't explain yourself to people who weren't entitled to explanations. You didn't soften truths to protect fragile egos. And that unapologetic clarity made people uneasy. Some mistook it for arrogance. That's always the accusation when access is removed. When people can't influence you anymore, they call it ego to protect their pride. But arrogance needs validation. Dominance doesn't. Dominance is steady whether it's acknowledged or not. It doesn't fluctuate based on reactions. It doesn't chase reassurance. You felt the difference in your body. Less tension. Less overthinking. Fewer imaginary conversations in your head. You weren't rehearsing anymore. You were responding in real time, trusting yourself to handle whatever came. That self-trust radiated outward. People sensed it, And sensing it, they either stepped up or stepped aside. Dominance didn't make you cruel. It made you precise. Your words became fewer but sharper. Your boundaries clearer. Your presence heavier. Confidence was the spark. Dominance was the fire that stayed lit without needing fuel from anyone else around you. You stopped caring what they thought. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly in the background of every decision you made. Before, their approval was a compass. Their reactions were a roadmap. You navigated carefully, measuring every word, every expression, every action against their imagined expectations. You wondered if you were too much, too loud, too quiet, too ambitious, too assertive. And in that constant measuring, you were never fully yourself. Then you realized something. Their opinions were never yours. Their judgments were never rules. The walls they built around their discomfort were not meant to contain you, but they tried anyway. And the moment you stopped giving them permission to dictate your behavior, a strange thing happened. You felt lighter. Your steps grew firmer. Your voice carried differently. Your presence wasn't negotiable anymore. People felt it immediately. Some resisted. They tried subtle manipulations, testing boundaries they thought still existed. They tried the old trick: sarcasm, dismissal, friendly advice, meant to steer you back into the lines they drew. But you didn't flinch. You didn't explain. You didn't soften. You simply kept moving. And in moving without hesitation, you revealed something terrifying. You were no longer part of their story. Freedom from their judgment gave you a clarity that fear could never offer. You began to see who valued you for what you were, who wanted you to shrink, who needed you to perform for their comfort. And the distinctions weren't always loud. Sometimes they were whispers, fleeting expressions. The way a laugh trailed off when you walked in, the way an email's tone shifted ever so slightly when it landed in your inbox. Every tiny signal became a map, and you were reading it effortlessly because you no longer relied on their feedback to guide your own movements. The funny thing is, once you stop caring, people start overcompensating. Those who once ignored you now watch your every move. Those who once dismissed you now tiptoe around you. They mirror the tension they feel internally, trying desperately to regain a sense of control that they've already lost. And they don't even realize it. Their actions betray them before their minds can catch up. You also notice a kind of liberation in how you speak. Words are no longer loaded with worry. Silence is no longer a threat. Opinions are not measured against the scale of approval. You say what needs to be said, nothing more, nothing less. And the irony is delicious. The less you cater to their expectations, the more power you hold. The less you bend, the more room you command. Some people will label this apathy. They'll call it arrogance, ego, coldness. They will mistake self-possession for hostility. But hostility requires energy, and arrogance demands validation. What you have is neither. What you have is autonomy. You are no longer a participant in their dramas. You are the observer, the reference point, the unshakable constant, that forces them to reevaluate themselves in the quiet moments they never anticipated. And this autonomy comes with a clarity that is almost cruel in its precision. You can choose where to engage, where to withdraw, who to trust, and who to leave guessing. Decisions are made without hesitation, without the invisible leash of expectation tugging at your conscience. Every movement is deliberate, every action uncompromised. It's not about hurting anyone. It's not about dominance through aggression or fear. It's about existing unbound by the invisible chains of other people's insecurities. And when they realize that their opinions no longer shape your world, that realization unsettles them in ways they can't articulate. It rattles the foundation they thought they controlled. You walk through spaces differently now. There's a weightlessness to it, but also an undeniable presence. You aren't loud. You don't need to be. Your choices, your poise, your consistency carry enough gravity to shift the room. People feel it before they can name it, before they can decide how to react. And in that feeling, in that subtle panic, you hold the ultimate power. You exist entirely on your own terms,